Alright, so for my portion of this project, I chose to look at squirrel behavior in response to food extraction with and without obstacles. I decided that I would test the success of squirrels to remove walnuts from a control, low difficulty obstacle, and high difficulty obstacle. Um, I started by doing some research into similar studies like this, and I found two studies of interest. The first one was actually a study that was conducted with European blackbirds in an urban setting rather than squirrels. They emphasize that urbanization has a significant ecological impact on animal behavior, where the results of the study found that urban animals are more likely to approach foreign objects than those raised in rural settings. This gave me hope that the squirrels would at least interact with my experiment, if nothing else. The second study was conducted in the UK, comparing red and gray squirrels' problem-solving abilities. This study set up a number of easy and difficult tasks for the squirrels to complete with the goal of food extraction. The study showed a number of comparisons between the two species, but they overwhelmingly showed higher success with easy extraction tasks and less success with difficult tasks, which is what I was hoping to find with my experiment. So my question, will squirrels at Elm Park retrieve walnuts less frequently if they are blocked by various obstacles? I hypothesized that if the obstacles get increasingly more difficult, then the squirrels will retrieve less walnuts when they are blocked by various obstacles. My methods are pretty straightforward. I'll demonstrate them, the experimental setup later, but I had three treatments rather, a control, an easy obstacle, and a difficult obstacle. The control was simply to leave a walnut in a flagged location without any obstruction. The low difficulty obstacle was made out of natural materials, and I would just bury the walnut under leaves or mulch. And the high difficulty obstacle was a little gift box, and in order to retrieve the walnut there, the box needed to be opened up. The goal was to leave each of these three treatments far away from each other enough that they wouldn't affect each other, but I would still be able to run the trials simultaneously for efficiency reasons. And I did 15 of each treatment, which gave me 45 trials total. So in the upper right hand corner, you can see my experimental setup. I made a little doodle on Word. So each of the flags represent where I would have put one of the treatments. They were about 20 meters apart, like I said, to avoid running into one another, but still being able to run the treatments at the same time. And I have pictures on the very left is the difficult obstacle, the middle is the easy obstacle, and the right is the control. So depending on the fluidity of the experiment, the weather, and the busyness of the park could affect the trials. So running each of the three treatments at the same time was hoping to account for some of the effect of those factors. In addition, we ran the trials on days that had similar weather conditions, about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And because this is an urban setting that gets lots of use, I also felt that it was important to run the trials during similar times of day, hoping to have similar amounts of patron use. So I ran them between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. My alternate hypothesis, there is a significant difference between treatment types and number of walnuts successfully removed, and my null hypothesis, there is not a significant difference between treatment types and number of walnuts successfully removed. Here are some action shots. On the very left, this squirrel was just leaving the control treatment. In the middle, you can see a squirrel interacting with the easy obstacle, and on the very right you can see that this little buddy got his walnut. He knocked over the box rather than lifting the lid off, but hey, whatever works. My results. So to analyze my raw data, I first ran an ANOVA test, and this test is designed to compare a categorical variable and a numerical variable, and in my case, to establish if there's a significant difference between different treatments and the success of squirrels removing the walnuts. The ANOVA yielded a p-value of 0.01479, which is less than 0.05, and suggests that our results are in fact significant. So following the ANOVA, I conducted a Tukey's post hoc test, which then compares pairs of treatments, and this emphasizes which treatments are significantly different from one another. And the key thing to note on this slide is that the easy and difficult treatments yielded results that are significantly different from one another with a p-value of about 0.03, suggesting that our alternate hypothesis is supported statistically. I'm going to stay on this slide very briefly, but I did generate a box plot on RStudio. However, when I was recording my data, I used a 0 to represent a remaining walnut and a 1 to represent a removed walnut. Unfortunately, this set the range of the plot to between 0 and 1. You can note how the difficult treatment ranges just about equally between those values. This is because 7 of the 15 trials, the walnut was removed, and in 8, the walnut remained. Like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I think my other analyses and figures do a much better job demonstrating the key trends. Oops. So, although my main focus was comparing the walnuts removed with easy and difficult obstacles, this is an interesting trend that arose. While there was significantly less success with the gift box obstacle, the successful trials tended to occur later in the trials on both days. So you can see that it took until about 4 or 5 trials on both days before there was a successful run. I thought this was interesting, and I want to bring that up again in my discussion. So, our results support our alternate hypothesis that there is a significant difference between treatment types and number of walnuts successfully removed. However, we reject the null hypothesis that there is no difference between treatments. As I mentioned in the results section, our ANOVA yielded a p-value less than 0.05, which suggested that there are significant differences between treatments. The Tukey's post hoc test further supported that claim and emphasized that the easy and difficult treatments were significantly different with a p-value of about 0.03. We likely see these results because it takes more time to get into the gift box than it does to uncover buried walnuts. Perhaps if the trials ran longer, there would be more success across the board of obstacles. But time and energy spent by the squirrel for foraging should not cost more than what will be successfully gained by extracting the walnut. Additionally, I noticed some interesting trends that I talked about earlier, and I want to bring up my last case study in general. So, a study conducted with eastern gray squirrels suggested that squirrels could solve reward extraction problems by engaging in one of two ways, either using an exhaustive search, which is trial and error, or by recalling a previously successful solution and applying that. So, in the end, the study demonstrated that squirrels most used the second solution process, where they would recall previously successful attempts and perform that same technique. This process involves retrieving related information of a previous problem and applying that successful experience to the current problem. I thought this was pretty cool and could definitely apply to the trends that I saw, where you would expect that the squirrels would be more successful in later trials. This was demonstrated by that tabulated raw data that I showed you a couple slides ago. But as with any experiment, there are also limitations to its practicality. In my case, some of the most interesting behavior trends arose. However, my experiment wasn't focused on those trends. For example, I got results about whether the walnuts were either removed or remained, but nothing about the observations before or after, whether or not they ate the walnut or took it with them. We could do a lot with that information. In addition, Elm Park is an urban setting, and these trends could totally vary among rural locations. However, this does have some cool implications for future studies. Perhaps a future experiment could track the amount of time or trials it takes for squirrels to understand an obstacle, or perhaps we could track what happens if the obstacle is changed, but the difficulty level remained the same. I think there's a lot of cool things that we could do to continue or extend this experiment in general. But for now, that concludes my portion of the presentation. Thank you for listening. However, I do want to talk about these major conclusions just to bring back everything and bring it together. So for Maddie's portion of the experiment, the cafeteria experiment, sunflower and walnuts are statistically different from all food types besides each other, and there is a difference in food preference between at least one food type. We reject the null hypothesis. For Allie's portion, predator odor and foraging behavior, the mean number of walnuts removed with odor present was not significantly different than the mean walnuts removed without the odor. This fails to reject the null hypothesis. And for me, the number of walnuts removed is significantly different between control, easy, and difficult treatments, and I reject my null hypothesis. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and I hope you enjoy the squirrel photos.